They say money can't buy character and poverty doesn't dictate worth. But when Caleb Ross, a struggling mechanic with grease under his nails and a heart of gold, knelt in the pouring rain to change a tire for a terrified teenager, he had no idea he was twisting the lug nuts on his own destiny. He didn't ask for a dime. He just wanted her safe. But when a fleet of black SUVs surrounded his garage the next morning, led by Victoria Sterling, the city's ruthless ice queen billionaire, Caleb thought his life was over. He expected a lawsuit. What he got was a proposal that would shatter every secret in Seattle. The rain in Seattle didn't just fall. It felt like it was trying to erase the city. It was 11:45 p.m. on a Tuesday. Caleb Ross wiped his hands on a rag that was arguably dirtier than his hands were. The fluorescent hum of Ross Auto Repair, a generous name for a two-bay garage in the grittier part of SoDo, was the only light on the block. Caleb was 32, but the gray hairs fighting a losing battle at his temples said 40. Being a single dad to a 7-year-old girl, Sophie, while drowning in debt left behind by his late wife's medical bills, had a way of aging a man. Clear's throat. He reached for the switch to kill the lights when he saw the headlights. Xenon beams, blue, white, and blinding, cutting through the deluge. They belonged to a car that cost more than Caleb's entire building. A sleek silver Porsche 911 Carrera. It wasn't moving right. It was limping. The front passenger side was grinding against the asphalt, sparks flying briefly before being hissed out by the rain. The car stopped right in front of his bay door. Caleb sighed, looking at his watch. Sophie was at his neighbor, Mrs. Gable's house, probably asleep, but he hated being late to pick her up. Just tell them we're closed, Cal, he muttered to himself. He walked out into the downpour. The driver's door opened and a girl stepped out. She couldn't have been more than 16. She was wearing a dress that looked like spun silk, now instantly soaked and shivering so violently he could hear her teeth chattering over the rain. I don't know what happened, she stammered, tears streaming down his face that still held the roundness of childhood. It made a loud noise and then it just pulled and my phone died and I can't find my dad. She looked terrified. Not just car trouble terrified, life terrified. Caleb's resolve to close up shop vanished. He saw Sophie in her face. If Sophie was 16 and stranded in this neighborhood, he'd pray to God someone like him was around. Hey, it's okay, Caleb said, raising his hands to show he wasn't a threat. Get inside the garage. It's warm. I'll look at the tire. I don't have any cash, she whispered, hugging herself. My stepmom, she'll kill me if she knows I took the car. Kid, get inside before you catch pneumonia. I didn't ask for cash. He ushered her onto the battered office chair next to the space heater. He handed her his thermos of coffee. Lukewarm, but better than nothing. It's decaf. Drink. Caleb went back out. The tire was shredded. A blowout. He grabbed the jack. He didn't use the air gun. He didn't want to wake the neighbors. He used the lug wrench, cranking it by hand, the rain plastering his coveralls to his skin. It took him 20 minutes to wrestle the damaged rim off and get the spare on. It wasn't a full tire, just a donut, but it would get her home. When he walked back inside, dripping wet, the girl had stopped crying. She was staring at a picture frame on his desk. Caleb and Sophie at the zoo. She's cute, the girl said softly. She's a terror, Caleb smiled. But I keep her. He wiped his face. You're good to go. But listen to me. This is a spare. Do not go over 50. Go straight home. Clear's throat. Do you need to use my phone to call someone? The girl shook her head rapidly, fear returning to her eyes. No. If I call, it makes it worse. I just need to get the car back before he notices. Caleb hesitated. He grabbed a business card from the counter stained with oil on the corner and a Sharpie. He wrote his personal cell number on the back. Take this. If the car shakes or stops, you call me. Day or night. My name is Caleb. I'm Chloe, she said, taking the card like it was a lifeline. Thank you, Caleb. You aren't like what my dad says about people down here. Drive safe, Chloe. He watched her tail lights fade into the rainy dark. He locked up, picked up a sleeping Sophie from Mrs. Gable, and went home to his one-bedroom apartment, worrying about the electric bill. He didn't think about the girl again. He figured it was just another Tuesday. He was wrong. Wednesday morning broke with a deceptive calm. The sky was a bruised purple, the rain having finally stopped. Caleb was under the hood of her '09 Honda Civic, wrestling with a stubborn alternator, when the sunlight in the garage was suddenly blocked out. It wasn't clouds. It was metal. 3 black SUVs, identical Cadillac Escalades with tinted windows, had pulled up in a phalanx formation, effectively blocking the entrance to Ross Auto Repair. Caleb wiped his forehead with his forearm, leaving a streak of grease. The bank, he thought, his stomach dropping. They finally sent the collectors, but bank collectors didn't travel in motorcades. The door of the middle SUV opened. A driver in a suit stepped out, opened the rear door, and extended a hand. The woman who emerged looked like she had walked out of a magazine spread for high-end corporate takeovers. She was tall, wearing a white power suit that was impossibly clean for a mechanic's lot. Her hair was a sharp blonde bob cut with geometric precision. She wore sunglasses despite the overcast sky. She didn't walk. She marched. The click of her heels on the concrete echoed like gunshots. 2 men in suits flanked her. Security. Real security. Not mall cops. Caleb put down his wrench and stood up, wiping his hands on a rag. "Can I help you folks? If you're looking for the detailing shop, they're 2 blocks over." The woman stopped 5 feet from him. She removed her sunglasses slowly, revealing eyes the color of steel and just as cold. She looked around the garage with undisguised disgust, her gaze lingering on the oil stains and the peeling paint. "Are you Caleb Ross?" Her voice was smooth, cultured, and laced with venom. "That's me," Caleb said, crossing his arms. "And you are?" "Victoria Sterling." The name hit Caleb like a physical blow. Victoria Sterling, CEO of Sterling Dynamics, tech mogul, real estate tycoon, one of the richest women in the Pacific Northwest. Her face was on the cover of Forbes last month. "Okay," Caleb said slowly. "What can I do for you, Ms. Sterling?" She reached into her pristine white blazer and pulled out a small crumpled object. She tossed it onto the workbench between them. It was his business card, the one he'd given Chloe. "My daughter Chloe came home last night smelling like hydraulic fluid and cheap coffee," Victoria said, her voice dropping an octave, becoming dangerous. She was driving a car she isn't licensed to drive. She was terrified. And she had this in her pocket. She took a step closer, invading his personal space. The bodyguards tensed. "I know how men like you operate, Mr. Ross. You find a vulnerable girl from a wealthy zip code. You manufacture a problem with her car. You play the hero. You get her contact info. And then what? You start blackmails. You groom her." Caleb felt the blood rush to his face. Anger hot and sharp flared in his chest. "Excuse me. You heard me," Victoria snapped. "The tire on the Porsche was destroyed. My mechanics tell me it was a blowout, but conveniently you were right there to save her. How much did you charge her, or is the payment coming later?" Caleb laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. He threw the dirty rag onto the bench next to his card. "You think I slashed her tire so I could change it in the rain for free?" Caleb asked, his voice steady but hard. "Lady, you need to check your tire pressure sensors, not my background." "Don't play coy with me," Victoria hissed. "I can buy this city block and turn it into a parking lot by noon. I want to know what you said to her. She was crying all night. Clears throat, she wouldn't speak to me or her father. She just kept clutching this dirty little card. She was crying." Caleb stepped forward, ignoring the bodyguards who stepped in to intercept him because she was scared to death of you. The garage went silent. The hum of the refrigerator in the corner seemed deafening. Victoria's eyes widened slightly. "What did you say?" "She was terrified," Caleb said, leaning over the workbench, locking eyes with her. "She wasn't scared of the dark. She wasn't scared of the flat tire. She was scared that her clears throat stepmom, I'm guessing that's you, would kill her for taking the car. She was shivering, soaking wet. And I gave her decaf coffee and changed her tire so she could get home safe. I didn't take a dime. I gave her my number because that spare is a piece of junk, and I didn't want a 16-year-old girl stranded on the I-5 in the middle of the night." He poked a finger at the card. "That's not a ransom note, Ms. Sterling. That's called being a decent human being. I know that's probably a foreign concept in your tax bracket, but down here we help people." Victoria stared at him, her mouth opened slightly, then closed. She looked at the card, then back at Caleb. For a second, the ice in her eyes cracked. She looked at his hands, scarred, greasy, rough. Then she looked at his eyes. They were brown, tired, and burning with an honesty she hadn't encountered in years. "You didn't charge her?" Victoria asked, her voice losing some of its edge. "Not a penny." Victoria signaled her bodyguards to stand down. She picked up the card, turning it over in her manicured fingers. She looked at the handwriting on the back. "Call if safe. Caleb." She was silent for a long moment. The dynamic in the garage shifted. The threat was still there, but curiosity had replaced the aggression. "Clears throat, my husband," Victoria said, the word tasting sour in her mouth. "Richard, he thinks you're a predator. He wanted to call the police. I wanted to see you first." "Well, you've seen me," Caleb said, picking up his wrench again. "If you're done insulting me, I have an alternator to fix. Unlike you, I don't get paid just for showing up." It was a risky jab, but Caleb was past the point of caring. Victoria didn't get angry. Instead, a slow, calculating smile spread across her red lips. It was the smile of a predator who had just found a new interesting toy. "You're bold, Mr. Ross." "I like bold." She reached into her bag and pulled out a checkbook. "I owe you for the service. What is your hourly rate?" It was on the house, Caleb grunted, turning his back to her to work on the Honda. "Nobody does anything for nothing," Victoria stated as if it were a law of physics. "I do." Victoria watched his back muscles tense as he cranked on a bolt. She looked around the failing shop again. She saw the stack of final notice bills on the counter that Caleb had tried to hide under a newspaper. "You're in debt, Mr. Ross," she observed coolly. "Deep debt. I can see the collection notices from here." Caleb froze. He turned around slowly. "Get out of my shop." Victoria placed a business card of her own on the workbench. It was heavy, embossed, and smelled of expensive perfume. "My daughter Chloe is troubled. She doesn't trust anyone, especially not me. But she trusted you enough to take this card." Victoria paused, her mask of perfection slipping just a fraction to reveal a desperate mother beneath. "I have a proposition for you, Caleb. A job. It pays 10 times what you make here in a year. I'm a mechanic, not a babysitter." "I don't need a babysitter. I need a mechanic," Victoria said enigmatically. "And I need someone who isn't afraid to tell me to go to hell." "You pass the interview," she turned on her heel. "Be at the Sterling estate at 7:00 p.m. tonight. Wear a suit. If you don't have one, buy one. Clears throat, and if I don't show up." Victoria paused at the door, the sunlight framing her silhouette. "Then Ross Auto Repair will be foreclosed on by Friday. I checked your lien holder. I own the bank, Caleb." She didn't wait for an answer. She got into the SUV and the convoy sped away, leaving Caleb standing in the quiet garage holding a wrench and a feeling that he had just made a deal with the devil. Caleb didn't buy a new suit. He couldn't afford one, and he refused to put another dime on his maxed-out credit card for a woman who threatened to foreclose on his life. He wore his only suit, a charcoal gray number he'd bought for his wife's funeral 3 years ago. It was a little tight across the shoulders now, and the fabric was cheap polyester, but he pressed a white shirt, polished his work boots until they shone like mirrors, and told Mrs. Gable he'd be back late. He drove his battered Ford F-150 up the winding drive of the Sterling estate. The gates alone cost more than his annual revenue. They swung open silently, guided by a camera that had likely scanned his retina, his license plate, and his credit score before he even stopped. The house wasn't a home. It was a fortress of glass and steel, perched on a cliff overlooking Puget Sound. It was beautiful, cold, and imposing, just like Victoria. A butler, a man named Elias, with posture so straight it looked painful, met him at the massive oak doors. "Mr. Ross, you are expected. Please follow me." Elias didn't lead him to a study or a living room. He led him through the house, down a long hallway lined with abstract art that looked like violent splashes of paint, and into a private elevator. They descended into the bowels of the estate. The doors opened to reveal a subterranean garage that was cleaner than most hospitals. The floor was polished epoxy reflecting the LED track lighting. There were cars here that Caleb had only seen in magazines, a McLaren P1, a vintage Rolls-Royce Phantom, a Lamborghini Mayora. But the bay in the center was empty, save for a lump covered by a heavy canvas tarp. Victoria was standing there. She had changed out of her power suit into a silk blouse and slacks, but she looked no less formidable. Next to her stood a man who could only be Richard Sterling. Richard was handsome in a way that money could buy. Capped teeth, tanned skin, hair that was perfectly coiffed. He held a tumbler of amber liquid, and his eyes were already glassy. So, Richard slurred slightly, swirling his drink. This is the knight in shining coveralls. Richard, behave, Victoria said, her voice flat. She turned to Caleb. You're late. I'm on time. Your Clear's throat gate took 5 minutes to open, Caleb replied, stepping off the elevator. He didn't extend a hand to Richard. He sensed the man was the type who washed his hands after touching the help. Let's cut to the chase. Richard sneered, stepping forward. He smelled of expensive scotch and aggression. My wife thinks you're some kind of savant. I think you're a grifter who got lucky with a flat tire. But since Victoria holds the purse strings to the charity projects, you're here. Show him the car, Victoria interrupted, her eyes warning Richard to stop. She walked over to the covered lump and pulled the canvas back. Caleb's breath hitched. It was, or had been, a 1957 Mercedes-Benz 300 SL Roadster, convertible, silver, one of the most beautiful cars ever made. But this one was a corpse. The front end was crumpled like an accordion. The windshield was shattered. The passenger door was caved in. The leather interior was torn and stained with something dark that had dried a long time ago. Jesus, Caleb whispered, his mechanic's instinct taking over. He walked around the wreck, running a hand over the twisted metal. Frame damage. Suspension is shot. Engine block might be cracked. What happened to this thing? The silence in the garage became suffocating. Richard took a long drink, his eyes narrowing. An accident, Victoria said, her voice unusually quiet. 12 years ago, 12 years. Caleb looked up. You've kept a wrecked classic in a climate-controlled basement for 12 years without touching it. I want it restored, Victoria said, ignoring his question. To factory condition. I want it to look like it did the day it rolled off the line. I want the engine to purr. I want the memory of the crash erased. It's a total loss, Ms. Sterling, Caleb said honestly. To fix this, you'd have to rebuild it from the ground up. Parts for a 57 SL are impossible to find. You're looking at 6 months of work minimum, maybe a year. I don't care how long it takes, Victoria said intensely. And I don't care what it costs. I have sourced a warehouse of parts in Germany. They arrive next week. You will work here every night, 6 p.m. to midnight. You keep your garage during the day, but your nights belong to me. Why this car? Caleb asked. You could buy 10 pristine ones for what this restoration will cost because this one is mine. She snapped then softer. It's the only thing I have left of before. Don't touch it. Richard suddenly barked. He slammed his glass down on a workbench. Victoria, this is insanity. That car is cursed. It killed Richard. Victoria's shout echoed off the concrete walls. It was a primal sound filled with a mixture of rage and panic. Get out. Go upstairs. Richard glared at Caleb, a look of pure, unadulterated hatred. You fix this car, grease monkey, and you'll regret it. Some things are broken for a reason. Clear's throat. He stormed towards the elevator. When the doors closed, Victoria let out a breath she seemed to have been holding for a decade. She leaned against the pristine fender of the McLaren, looking suddenly fragile. The job pays $50,000 a month, she said to the floor. Plus a bonus upon completion. That clears your debt in 2 months, Caleb. It secures Sophie's future. Caleb looked at the wrecked car, then at the woman who was clearly as broken as the machine. He saw the final notice bills on his counter in his mind. He saw Sophie wearing hand-me-down shoes. I'll need half up front, Caleb said. And I don't work for Richard. I work for you. If he comes down here while I'm working, I walk. Victoria looked up, her steel mask sliding back into place. Agreed. Elias will write the check. One question, Caleb said, pointing at the dark stain on the leather seat. Is that blood? Victoria turned away, walking toward the shadows. Just fix the car, Caleb. Please. 3 weeks later, Caleb was exhausted. But for the first time in years, he wasn't stressed about money. The check had cleared. The bank lien was gone. He had even bought Sophie a new bicycle, purple, with streamers. But the Sterling estate was draining him in a different way. Every night at 6 p.m. he scanned his badge at the gate. He changed into fresh coveralls in the estate garage and went to war with the Mercedes. It was slow, grueling work. He had stripped the car down to the chassis. He was straightening the frame millimeter by millimeter. It was quiet, lonely work until Chloe started showing up. It started small. She would come down ostensibly to get a soda from the garage fridge. Then she started lingering, sitting on a stool, doing homework, watching him weld. She was a lonely kid. Caleb recognized the signs. She had everything money could buy, but her house was a war zone of silence and passive aggression. "You're doing it wrong," she said one Tuesday night, pointing at his math when he was calculating the fuel-air mixture ratio. Caleb looked up, wiping grease from his nose. "Excuse me. I've been fixing cars since before you were born." "Yeah, but that's basic algebra." Chloe smirked, hopping off her stool. "You forgot to carry the variable." She grabbed his notepad and scribbled a correction. Caleb checked it. She was right. "Okay, Einstein," Caleb grinned. "You act smart, but can you hand me a 10mm socket without asking what it looks like?" "Try me." Within a week, Chloe was his unofficial apprentice. She wasn't afraid of the grease. In fact, she seemed to crave it. It was the only time she looked relaxed when she had oil on her hands and was helping Caleb sand down a rusted fender. They talked about everything. School, boys, the way Richard ignored her, the way her mother seemed to look through her. "She loves you, you know," Caleb said one night, struggling with a rusted bolt. "Your mom. She loves her reputation," Chloe muttered, scrubbing a spark plug. "She loves her company. She looks at me and sees, I don't know, a mistake." "She looks at you and sees herself," Caleb corrected. "And she's scared she's going to mess you up." "How do you know?" "Because I look at Sophie and I'm terrified every day that I'm not enough to be both a mom and a dad." "Parents are just people, Chloe. We're mostly faking it." The elevator chimed. Chloe froze, eyes darting to the door. It was Victoria. She was holding 2 glasses and a bottle of very expensive Japanese whiskey. She froze when she saw Chloe in a pair of oversized coveralls holding a wire brush. "Chloe," Victoria asked, bewildered. "What are you doing?" "Helping," Chloe said defensively, stepping back. "I was just going." "Stay," Caleb said firmly. "She's actually helping. She's got better hands for the small wiring than I do." Victoria looked from the mechanic to her daughter. She saw the smudge of dirt on Chloe's cheek. She saw the smile that was fading from Chloe's face. I brought a drink," Victoria said, her voice uncharacteristically unsure for the mechanic. "But I suppose I'll go do my homework," Chloe mumbled, rushing past her mother to the elevator. The doors closed, leaving Caleb and Victoria alone. The tension in the room shifted from familial to something heavier, hotter. Victoria walked over and placed the glasses on the workbench right next to a disassembled carburetor. She poured. "You have my daughter cleaning spark plugs," Victoria said, handing him a glass. "She's good at it. Smart kid. You should be proud." "I am proud," Victoria whispered. She took a sip, wincing as the amber liquid burned, going down. "I clears throat, just don't know how to talk to her. Everything I say sounds like a board meeting directive." "Stop trying to manage her," Caleb said, taking a sip. The whiskey was smooth, tasting of smoke and oak. "Just be with her. Like this," he gestured to the car. "We strip it down to the metal. We find the broken parts. We replace them. But you can't rush the bond. The metal has to set." Victoria looked at him. Really. Looked at him. The harsh overhead lights caught the silver in his beard, the kindness in his tired eyes. She felt a crack in the ice fortress she had built around her heart. "This car," she said, running a finger along the smooth, newly primed fender. "It was the car my first husband died in. Chloe's father." Caleb went still. The pieces clicked, the blood on the seat, the 12 years of storage, the hatred Richard had for the machine. "I was driving," Victoria confessed, the words tumbling out. "We were arguing. It was raining just like the night you helped Chloe. I lost control. We hit a tree. He died instantly. I walked away without a scratch." She looked up at Caleb, tears brimming in her steel gray eyes. "Richard hates this car because it reminds him he's the replacement. He hates Chloe because she looks like him. And I wanted to fix it because I thought maybe if I put the car back together, I could put myself back together." She was trembling. Without thinking, Caleb set his drink down. He stepped forward and wrapped his arms around her. It wasn't a romantic embrace. Not at first. It was the way he held Sophie when she had a nightmare. He held her tight, letting her fall apart against his chest. She smelled of Chanel No. 5 and sorrow. Victoria stiffened for a second, then melted. She buried her face in his greasy coveralls and sobbed. Great heaving sobs that echoed in the silent garage. Caleb stroked her hair, his rough hand gentle against the sleek blonde bob. It wasn't your fault, Vic. It wasn't your fault. They stood there for a long time. When she finally pulled back, her mascara was smeared, her eyes red. She looked beautiful. She looked up at him and the air changed. The grief morphed into a desperate need for connection. Her gaze dropped to his lips. Caleb, she breathed. She leaned in. Caleb didn't pull away. He leaned down, his heart hammering against his ribs like a piston. Their lips were an inch apart when the sound of a slow, sarcastic clap echoed from the balcony above. Clap, clap, clap. They sprang apart. Richard was standing on the steel mezzanine that overlooked the workshop. He was leaning over the railing, a cruel twisted smile on his face. He held a phone in his hand, the camera lens pointed directly at them. "Bravo," Richard called down, his voice dripping with malice. "The grieving widow and the hired help. It's almost poetic. Or it would be if it wasn't so pathetic." Victoria wiped her face, the ice returning instantly. "Richard, go to bed." "Oh, I'm going." Richard laughed, waving the phone. "But I think the board of directors might find this video very interesting. CEO mentally unstable dances with mechanic while obsessing over dead husband's death car." "That's a headline, Victoria. That's a stock dropper." He turned and walked away. Caleb took a step toward the stairs, his fists clenched. "I'm going to kill him." Victoria grabbed his arm. Her grip was iron. "No," she said, her eyes hard and dry. "He wants you to hit him. He wants a lawsuit. He wants to destroy you. So, what do we do?" Caleb asked, adrenaline coursing through him. Victoria looked at the disassembled Mercedes, then at the elevator where Richard had disappeared. "We finish the car," she said coldly, "and then I destroy him." Clear's throat, but as Caleb watched her, he saw the tremor in her hands. Richard had the ammunition now, and in the world of billionaires, information was a weapon far deadlier than a lug wrench. For the next week, the silence in the Sterling garage was deafening. Caleb and Victoria worked in a synchronized, terrified orbit. They didn't speak about the near kiss. They didn't speak about Richard's threat. They just worked. The 1957 Mercedes was no longer a wreck. It was becoming a masterpiece. The silver paint, a custom mix Caleb had spent 3 days perfecting, looked like liquid mercury under the lights. The engine, rebuilt with parts shipped from a dusty warehouse in Stuttgart, was ready to fire. But the air felt heavy, like the drop in pressure before a hurricane. It broke on a Friday morning. Caleb was at his own shop, Ross Auto Repair. He was changing the oil on a sedan, whistling a tune, thinking about the weekend. He planned to take Sophie to the aquarium with the extra money he'd saved. He heard tires screech outside. Not one car, many. Police search warrant. Nobody moved. The shout was followed by the crash of his office door being kicked in. Caleb slid out from under the lift, wiping his hands, heart hammering. "Whoa, officer. What's this about?" 4 uniformed officers and 2 detectives in cheap suits swarmed the small bay. One of the detectives, a man with a face like a bulldog, shoved a piece of paper in Caleb's chest. "Caleb Ross, you're under arrest." "Arrest for what?" Caleb stammered as they spun him around, slamming his face against the cold metal of the lift. The handcuffs bit into his wrists. "Grand larceny receiving stolen property. Corporate espionage," the detective listed off, patting him down. "We got a tip. You've been stripping parts from Sterling Dynamics' private collection." "That's insanity," Caleb yelled, struggling. "I work for Ms. Sterling. She hired me." "Yeah, well, she didn't hire you to stash a $50,000 fuel injection system in your locker." Another officer emerged from the back office holding a plastic bag. Inside was a gleaming chrome fuel pump, vintage Mercedes-Benz. Caleb stared at it. "I've never seen that before in my life. That belongs on the car I'm restoring. Save it for the judge." "Grease monkey." They dragged him out. The neighborhood was watching. Mrs. Gable was on her porch, hand over her mouth. Sophie wasn't there. Thank God she was at school. But the shame burned Caleb hotter than any welding torch. As they shoved him into the back of the cruiser, Caleb saw a familiar black Escalade parked down the street. The window rolled down just an inch. Richard Sterling's face appeared, smiling. He raised a hand in a mock salute as the siren wailed, drowning out Caleb's scream of innocence. In the holding cell, time lost its meaning. It smelled of bleach and despair. Caleb sat on the metal bench, head in his hands. They had confiscated his phone. He couldn't call Victoria. He couldn't call Mrs. Gable to pick up Sophie. Sophie. The thought paralyzed him. Clear's throat. If he didn't get out by 3 p.m., Child Protective Services would be called. Richard knew that this wasn't just about the job. This was an execution of his life. Across town in the gleaming glass tower of Sterling Dynamics, Victoria was in the middle of a board meeting when her phone buzzed. A text from Richard. Check the news. Your boy is in chains. Resign as CEO by 5 p.m. or I release the video of you two and I testify that you were his accomplice in the theft. I'll take the company, the house, and full custody of Chloe. Victoria went pale. She stood up abruptly, knocking her chair over. Meeting adjourned, she announced, her voice trembling with a rage she could barely contain. She ran to her office, dialing her legal team. Get Caleb Ross out now. I don't care what the bail is. I don't care who the judge is. Buy the courthouse if you have to. Sterling, her lawyer said, voice grave. We can't. The DA is pushing for no bail. They're claiming flight risk. And Richard has submitted an affidavit claiming you were unaware of the theft, positioning himself as the whistleblower. If you intervene now, it looks like obstruction. It looks like you're covering for your lover. Victoria threw the phone against the wall. It shattered. She sank into her leather chair, staring at the view of the city she owned, feeling utterly powerless. Richard had checkmated her. If she helped Caleb, she confirmed the affair and lost her company and the power to protect him long term. If she did nothing, Caleb went to prison. And she lost the only man who had made her feel human in a decade. The door to her office creaked open. Victoria looked up, expecting her assistant. It was Chloe. The teenager looked different. She wasn't wearing her usual oversized hoodie. She was wearing a blazer she'd stolen from Victoria's closet, and her eyes were burning with a fierce intelligence. He didn't do it, Chloe said. I know, Victoria whispered. But I can't prove it. Richard planned this perfectly. Richard is an idiot, Chloe said flatly. She walked over to Victoria's desk and placed a laptop on it. He thinks because he pays for the security system, he controls it. But he forgot that you made me take those coding classes last summer. Victoria sat up. Chloe, what did you do? I hacked the house network, Chloe said, typing furiously. Richard wiped the footage from the garage cameras for last night. He thought that was enough. But he didn't know about the cloud backup for the nanny cam he installed in the garage to spy on you. She hit enter. A video popped up. It was grainy night vision footage. It showed Richard at 3 a.m. entering the garage. He wasn't alone. He was with a man in a hooded sweatshirt. They were prying the fuel pump off the Mercedes. Richard handed the man an envelope of cash and a box containing the part. Plant it in his locker. Richard's voice was tiny but audible. And called the cops at 900 a.m. sharp. Victoria stared at the screen, her hand covering her mouth. Then she looked at her daughter. For the first time, she didn't see a troubled teen. She saw a warrior. You recorded this. I recovered it, Chloe said. Mom, you have to go get him. Screw the board. Screw the company. If we let Caleb rot in there, we're garbage. Victoria stood up. She walked around the desk and grabbed Chloe's face in her hands, kissing her forehead fiercely. Get in the car, Victoria commanded, grabbing her keys. We're going to prison. The police station was a hive of activity, but it fell silent when Victoria Sterling walked in. She didn't look like a CEO today. She looked like a harak in high heels. Chloe was a step behind her, clutching the laptop like a shield. I want to see the captain, Victoria announced to the desk sergeant. Now, ma'am, you can't just. I am Victoria Sterling. My taxes paid for this building. Get the captain. 5 minutes later, she was in the captain's office. The bulldog detective was there looking smug. Miss Sterling, the captain said nervously. We were just processing the paperwork. It's an open and shut case. We found the stolen property and you found planted evidence. Victoria cut him off. Chloe, show them. Chloe opened the laptop and pressed play. The room went silent as they watched Richard Sterling commit a felony. The detective's face went from red to white. He looked at the captain who was glaring at him. You got a tip from Richard Sterling, didn't you? The captain asked the detective quietly. He said he had proof. Unarrest him, the Clear's throat captain barked. Now, and get a warrant for Richard Sterling. Caleb was sitting on the cot, staring at the concrete floor when the cell door buzzed and slid open. He didn't look up. I told you I want a lawyer. You don't need a lawyer, Caleb. He looked up. Victoria was standing there, framed by the harsh hallway light. Behind her, peeking around the door frame, was Chloe. Caleb stood up, his legs shaky. Vic. She didn't care about the cameras. She didn't care about the cops watching. She rushed into the cell and threw her arms around him. Caleb held her, burying his face in her neck, the smell of her perfume washing away the stench of the jail. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry, Sophie. Caleb gasped, pulling back. I have to get Sophie. Mrs. Gable picked her up, Chloe said, stepping forward with a shy smile. I called her. I told her you were helping us with a car emergency. Sophie is fine. She's eating pizza. Caleb looked at the teenager, tears welling in his eyes. You called her? Yeah. I used the number on the business card. Chloe shrugged. The one you gave me. Caleb let out a laugh that was half sob. He reached out and squeezed Chloe's shoulder. Thank you, kid. You saved me. We're not done yet, Victoria said, her eyes hardening. Richard is still out there, and tonight is the unveiling gala. The press is already gathering at the estate. He's planning to announce his takeover of the company tonight. Caleb wiped his face. The exhaustion was gone, replaced by a cold resolve. As the car finished, he asked. It needs the fuel pump, Victoria said. The police gave it back to us as evidence, but the engine isn't tuned. It won't run. Clear's throat. Caleb looked at his watch. It was 5 p.m. The gala started at 8 hours. Get me back to the garage, Caleb said. I can get it running in 2 hours. Caleb, you just got out of jail, Victoria said. You don't have to do this. He tried to take my daughter from me, Caleb said, his voice low and dangerous. He tried to ruin my life. I'm not going to let him stand on that stage and win. We're going to drive that car right down his throat. The scene at the Sterling estate was chaotic. Tents were set up on the lawn. Waiters circulated with champagne. The elite of Seattle were whispering about the rumors of Caleb's arrest and Victoria's impending resignation. Richard Sterling stood at the podium in the center of the ballroom, looking every bit the victor. He checked his watch. Victoria wasn't here. Caleb was in a cell. Perfection. Ladies and gentlemen, Richard began, his voice booming over the speakers. Thank you for coming. Tonight was supposed to be a celebration of restoration. But sadly, due to unforeseen circumstances involving mismanagement, Victoria Sterling will not be joining us. Furthermore, in light of recent criminal activities involving her staff, it is with a heavy heart that I announce a restructuring of Sterling Dynamics. A murmur went through the crowd. I will be assuming the role of interim CEO effective immediately to restore faith in our legacy. He paused for applause. He got a few polite claps. Then a sound cut through the ballroom chatter. It was a low, guttural growl, a mechanical roar that vibrated the crystal glasses on the tables. Vroom. The crowd turned toward the double doors at the back of the ballroom, which led to the terrace and the garage ramp. Richard froze. He knew that sound. It was the sound of a beast waking up. The doors burst open. The 1957 Mercedes-Benz 300SL Roadster didn't just enter. It made an entrance. It gleamed under the chandeliers, a silver bullet of history. The engine revved, a symphony of German engineering and American grit. Caleb was behind the wheel, looking like a movie star in a tuxedo Victoria had bought him on the way over. In the passenger seat sat Victoria, radiant in a red dress that looked like war paint. Caleb gunned the engine, driving the car slowly through the parted crowd right up to the stage. He killed the ignition. The silence was absolute. Victoria stepped out of the car. She didn't look at the crowd. She walked up the stairs to the stage, stood next to a pale, trembling Richard, and took the microphone from his hand. Sorry I'm late, she said, her voice cool and amplified. I was busy picking up my lead mechanic from a false imprisonment. She pointed to the massive screen behind the stage where Richard had projected his company logo. Chloe, if you would, Victoria said. The screen flickered. The logo disappeared. The security footage of Richard planting the stolen parts played for 300 of the city's most powerful people. Gasps filled the room. Richard lunged for the laptop connected to the projector, but he was tackled, not by security, but by Caleb, who had vaulted onto the stage. Caleb held Richard down, his mechanic's grip like a vice. That's for the car, Caleb whispered in Richard's ear. And this, he nodded to the side of the stage. The bulldog detective and 2 uniformed officers were walking out from behind the curtains as for the flat tire. Richard was handcuffed in front of the flashing bulbs of the paparazzi as they dragged him away, screaming threats. Victoria looked at Caleb. The crowd erupted into applause, not for the business, but for the show. Victoria didn't acknowledge them. She walked over to Caleb, who was straightening his tie. "You clean up nice, Ross," she said, a genuine smile breaking through. "I try." Caleb grinned. "Does this mean I get that bonus?" Victoria laughed, a free, happy sound. She reached out and pulled his tie, bringing his face down to hers. "I think we can negotiate," she whispered. And in front of the board, the press and her grinning daughter, the Ice Queen of Seattle, kissed the mechanic from Soto. And she didn't care who was watching. 6 months later, the rain in Seattle was just as wet. But it didn't feel as cold. It was a Sunday morning. The garage door of Ross and Sterling Restorations, formerly Ross Auto Repair, rolled up. The shop had expanded. It now took up the entire block. The peeling paint was gone, replaced by brick and ivy, but the heart of the place remained. It still smelled of oil, coffee, and hard work. Caleb walked out, wiping his hands on a rag. He wasn't wearing a tuxedo today, just his trusty coveralls, though these were newer and had his name stitched in gold thread, a gift from Sophie. "All right, ease off the clutch." Slowly, Caleb called out. The silver 1957 Mercedes-Benz 300 SL Roadster lurched forward, then stalled with a violent jerk. Chloe groaned, dropping her forehead onto the steering wheel. "I'm going to ruin it. Mom is going to kill me." "Your mom isn't going to kill you," Caleb said, leaning into the cockpit. "And you can't kill this car. We rebuilt it to survive a nuclear blast. Try again. Give it a little more gas this time." Chloe took a deep breath. She looked different now. The fear that had defined her face that rainy night 6 months ago was gone, replaced by a confident glow. She turned the key. The engine roared to life. She eased the clutch out, gave it gas, and the car rolled smoothly onto the asphalt. "I did it," she screamed over the engine noise. "Keep your eyes on the road." Caleb laughed, jogging to the passenger side and hopping in. They drove towards the estate, the wind in their hair. When they pulled up the long driveway, the gates opened instantly. But instead of the oppressive silence that used to hang over the Sterling mansion, there was noise. Music. Pop music. On the front lawn, Victoria Sterling, the Ice Queen herself, was barefoot. She was running through a sprinkler with 8-year-old Sophie. Caleb watched from the car, a lump forming in his throat. Victoria was laughing, her expensive dress soaked, her hair a mess. She looked younger, lighter, free. Chloe killed the engine and looked at Caleb. "You know, before you, we never used the front lawn. It was ornamental only. Grass is meant to be walked on, kid," Caleb said. They got out. Sophie saw them and came sprinting over, tackling Caleb with a wet hug. "Daddy, Victoria, let me eat ice cream for breakfast." "She did she?" Caleb raised an eyebrow at Victoria, who was walking over, wringing out her wet hair. "It was organic matcha ice cream," Victoria defended herself, breathless and smiling. "That counts as a vegetable." "I don't think that's how science works, Vic." Caleb grinned, pulling her in for a kiss. She tasted like rain and sugar. Richard was gone, serving 5 to 10 in a minimum security facility for corporate fraud and theft. The divorce had been finalized last week. Sterling Dynamics was thriving, but Victoria worked 4 days a week now. The other 3 belonged to the family they had cobbled together from broken parts. Later that evening, after the girls had crashed on the couch watching a movie, Caleb and Victoria sat on the terrace overlooking the Sound. The Mercedes sat in the driveway, gleaming in the twilight. "You know," Victoria said softly, resting her head on Caleb's shoulder. "I used to hate that car. It was a coffin to me. And now she looked at the silver curve of the fender, then at the man holding her hand. "Now it's the reason I have a life." Caleb squeezed her hand. "It wasn't the car, Vic. The car was just the metal. You did the work." "We did the work," she corrected. She pulled a small box out of her pocket. It wasn't a ring. Not yet. It was a key, a brand new key to the estate. "Move in," she said officially. "I'm tired of you driving home to Soto every night." Caleb looked at the key, then at the woman who had once threatened to foreclose on his existence. He thought about the empty apartment, the debt, the loneliness. Then he looked at the warmth in her eyes. "Only if I get to park the truck in the garage next to the McLaren," he said. "Deal." She smiled. Caleb took the key. He didn't know what the future held. He knew engines would break, tires would go flat, and storms would come. But as he looked at Victoria, he knew they had the tools to fix whatever broke. "Hey, Vic. Yeah. Remind me to thank Chloe." "For what?" "For not knowing how to change a tire." Victoria laughed, and the sound drifted out over the water, brighter than the city lights, proving once and for all that while money could buy a house, only love could build a home. Caleb Ross thought he was just fixing a flat tire in the rain. He didn't know he was repairing two broken families. In a world that often tells us to look away, to keep driving, and to mind our own business, Caleb stopped. He proved that the currency of character is worth more than any bank account. Victoria Sterling had billions, but she was bankrupt in the things that mattered until a mechanic with grease on his hands showed her that strength isn't about being hard. It's about being able to rebuild after you break. They say you can't judge a book by its cover, but maybe the real lesson is that you shouldn't judge a mechanic by his bank balance or a billionaire by her icy stare. Under the hood, we're all just trying to get home safely. What an incredible journey for Caleb and Victoria. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button. It really helps us share more stories like this. And what about you? Have you ever had a random act of kindness change your life? Let me know in the comments below. I'd love to read your stories. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new story. Thanks for listening, and remember, sometimes the wrong turn leads to the right place.